So today we're going to look at how to use ggplot2 efficiently. And the real trick with ggplot is to make sure your data is nicely organized in a data frame. And that way ggplot can find the variables for plotting multiple panels or plotting on the X or Y axis and so on. So I'll flick over to RStudio and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so here we are in RStudio. I pre-prepared some data so that we could just skip to the interesting bit, which is the ggplot2 bit. So I've got my script squared up here. I'm reading the library ggplot2. And then here's a short script that I'll share online that just makes a data set. So I'll just run this. A data set's going to have 20 samples for each of 3 groups. There's going to be some variation around a regression trend. And then this part here is just a complicated way of setting up 3 independent regression lines that are cubic regressions, so they have some bendiness in them. And here's the key really for ggplot is whatever data we have, we want to wrangle it into a nice data frame. So I'll run that, and I better load the ggplot2 library too. So we'll just check out that data frame I made first up. So we have a variable yobs, which are our observations. So that's some outcome variable we're going to plot on the y-axis. We have another variable xvar, which is going to be going on the x-axis. And so that's just the values 1 to 20 repeated 3 times. And then we have group labels. And so we're going to have 3 groups, A, B, and C, in this data frame. So the trick is to always make sure your data is organized in this long format rather than the wide format. So we could have also organized this with different columns for each group. So we could have a column of Y observations for group A, another column for group B, another column for group C, and so on. That would be called wide format data, and ggplot doesn't like wide format data. It likes long format data. So there's a whole bunch of tools for data wrangling, like the package dplyr, datapliers, and the package tidyr, and they let you do things like turn wide data into long data. So learning to master those is really a prerequisite for any complicated ggplot, because you need to be able to get the data in the shape that ggplot likes. Luckily, it's not hard to learn those tools, and there's plenty of help online. So now we've got our data frame there. Let's start setting up our ggplot object. Let's make some new lines. I'll make a new section in my code. Plot the data. In fact, let's just do a simple plot with base R first. So I could just say plot dat dollars xvar dat dollars yobs, and you see I get a plot there quickly of all the data, and you can kind of see there's 3 trend lines running through that. So what would be nice to do is put each individual group on a different panel, or color the individual groups differently so they would stand out more. And the easiest way to do that is with ggplot. So all ggplots take a data frame as an input. So we start with this command ggplot and type dat, which was the name of our data frame. So now I'm going to run that, and you'll see that just creates a blank page in my plot window. So really a key to ggplot is it's going to build the plot up like layers. So as long as you do things in the order you want them to appear on the screen, then it should all work nicely. Now, we need to add on some axes. So to add on axes, we use this command as. So AES, which stands for aesthetics. And we want to have an x-axis, which is going to be the x variable, and a y-axis, which is going to be the y variable. So if we do this, we've got base plot, and then we use plus to string together the different layers. We'll get a plot with some axes on it, but there's no data on the plot yet, right? So if we want to add data on there, we add on a layer, a geom. So a sensible geom for this kind of data, which is just x and y data, would be a points geom. So use the ggplot command geom point. In fact, if you just start typing geom, you see all the options there in RStudio. So just go to point. And I don't need to put any special commands in here for geom point just yet. And you'll see I get my points back up, and it looks very much like that base R plot. So again, you can kind of see our three different trends here, our three groups, but we might like to color the data by those three groups. So if we go back up to our aesthetics here, we can type color equals group, GRP, which was our grouping variable. And now each point is going to be colored by the different groups. So now I can kind of see quite clearly how the different groups have different trends. So you can see we just build our ggplot up as a series of statements like this. And in fact, that's why it's called ggplot, because GG stands for grammar of graphics. So it's just like building a sentence. I'm saying first make a plot, now put on axes to my plot, now add points to that plot. But we can get a bit more fancy here. So if we want our plot to look more like the base R plot than this plot with grid lines and grey background, we can use what ggplot calls themes. So if I type theme, there's a whole series there, and it should be a theme classic. So that produces a plot that looks much like the base R plot, but nicely it's done the legend automatically for us, which base R won't do, and it's colored them as well. Let's keep going a bit further. What if I wanted to put the different groups on different panels? That will get quite fiddly to do with base R, but in ggplot it's easy. We can use this command facet wrap. We just start with a tilde, so that's the little squiggly line in the top left-hand corner of your keyboard. And we just name the variable we want to facet by. So I want to facet by the groups. I'll put that plus in there so it still finishes up with a classic theme. So now I get 3 facets, 1 plot for each group. And we can clearly see the different trends that they have. Okay, let's keep going with this. Let's try and change the color of the points. So anything I do with changing colors, the color scheme and so on, is going to be affected by the theme. So because I want it to override this theme here, I want to put it after that. So we'll do the theme classic first, which does this nice white-black background, and then we'll tell ggplot to use a different color palette. So I can say scale, color, oops, spelled that wrong, color, and there's many different options here. Let's use Brewer, which are the color Brewer palettes, and we can type, I believe, palette, and we can name one like dark 2, and we get a different color palette. So this is the dark color palette from Color Brewer. So if you want to see other palettes, go to Color Brewer. I believe it's colorbrewer.org, or is it colorbrewer2.org? Colorbrewer2.org, yep. And there's a whole range of different color palettes that you can name and use within ggplot here. So that's a basic introduction to faceting ggplot. Another really neat thing ggplot can do is add trend lines to the data as well. So we can kind of see what look like 3 different trend patterns here, but we might like to emphasize those a bit more. So we could do that with what's called a smooth. So let's put it, maybe it's clearest if we put it there after the points. All right, stat smooth, and I just add that there. Now, because I've colored and faceted by groups, it's going to fit 1 smooth for each group. And so now we see trend lines fitted through the middle of each of our groups. And it's nice that ggplot has figured out that we want 1 trend line for each group, not one single overall trend line for all the groups together. And that smooth function is actually quite flexible. So we can tell it to use different methods, like just a linear regression fit. which does pretty well for groups B and C, but not so well for group A, which has a hump shape relationship. We could also tell it to use a more fancy method like GAM. We can even tell it to modify the formula that GAM uses. So if I write formula here equals y given, then it's still fitting the same GAM, but I have all of the same options within this formula that you would have in a normal GAM object. So if I set k equals 2, that will limit the amount of, well, I put minus instead of equals. That will limit the amount of bendiness in the spline. So you can see that modifies how the spline fits a little bit. Yeah, so that's how to do ggplot really efficiently. The key steps really are make sure you have this nice long format data frame. So if you have different groups in your data, you want to have those different groups as different rows and have them labeled with another variable rather than having the different groups as different columns. And then you can lay up your graphs quite nicely. Now, one last trick for really efficient ggplot is to create a snippet in it to automatically create your ggplots. So to do that, if you navigate to Tools and then Global Options in RStudio, find the Code pane and then click Edit Snippets. You can add a new snippet to RStudio. So I'm going to make a new snippet called GG, and I'm going to type in what I want to have in that snippet. So you use this $sign to create labels that you can tab flick through and edit. I'll show you that in a minute. So let's make ggplot data AES x equals, it's going to copy and paste that line there, x variable, y equals y variable, and we'll put color there. So now I've created our snippet. If I just type GG and hit tab, it now appears here in ggplot's menu and it automatically creates that plot. And now if I type that in there, you see it automatically fills in those lines. I actually mucked up my snippet, so I'm just going to go back and edit it. I made all of the labels. Oh, sorry. So label 1 is data, label 2 is going to be the x variable, label 3 will be the y variable, and let's add geom as well. I like to do that with another label. Dollars, curly braces for geom type. And that's probably enough. So I'll save that, apply that, close it. Now let's go back. So type GG, hit tab, hit enter. There it is, data dat, xvar, x variable, xvar, hit tab again, automatically goes to y variable, which is called yobs, and geom type points. Point, yep. So I mistype obs. And so there's a very quick ggplot. Hope you enjoy ggplot2. Definitely makes my life a lot quicker and easier and makes my plotting more fun. Thanks for joining me.